Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep on research design.
Ooh, fun.
Specifically something called factorial design.
Okay.
You sent over some textbook excerpts on this, and it seems like you're really interested in
Yeah.
how researchers design experiments to study the impact of multiple variables all at
And
once.
it's some moving parts.
Yeah. So we're going to break down what factorial designs are, why they're so powerful, and how researchers use them to
Uncover.
uncover those hidden relationships between different factors that can influence an experiment.
What I think is so cool about factorial designs is that they let us go beyond simple cause and effect and really explore the ways different variables can interact with each other.
Okay.
It's like solving a puzzle, but with way more layers.
I love puzzles. So let's unpack this.
Okay.
So the textbook excerpt defines factorial design as a research method that lets you study the effects of two or more independent variables at the same time. But what's really cool is that researchers actually test all possible combinations of these variables.
Yeah.
So that's got to give them a much more complete picture, right?
Exactly. By considering all those possible combinations, factorial designs can provide a much more thorough and nuanced understanding of how these variables work together to influence the outcome of an experiment.
Okay.
We also call these variables factors.
Oh, okay, factors.
Yeah, just another term.
Got it.
So yeah, they're really looking at how those factors work together to influence the result.
So instead of looking at one variable at a time, it's like we're getting like a 3D view of what's happening.
Yeah, a much more holistic picture.
The text gives an example from a study by Tulving and Pearlstone back in 1965.
Oh yeah, a classic.
It involved memory recall and used two independent variables.
Okay.
The number of words to be memorized and whether or not cues were provided during recall.
Right, so in that study, they had 3 levels for the number of words.
Okay.
12 words, 24 words, and 48 words. And for the cues, they had 2 levels, cued recall and free recall.
Okay.
So imagine you're a participant in the study. You might get a list of 12 words and then get some cues to help you remember them. Or you might have to memorize 48 words with no help at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So to cover all the bases, they created 6 different groups,
Right.
each with a unique combination of these variables.
Okay, I'm following.
And this is key. They randomly assigned people to each of these 6 groups.
Right.
This is super important for good experimental design.
Yeah, to make sure there's no bias.
Exactly. Random assignment really helps to control for any confounding variables.
Okay, so starting to see how all this fits together.
Yeah.
So by looking at how each group performs, in recalling the words, researchers can figure out the main effects of each variable.
Right.
Like, does the number of words even matter? And they could also see any potential interactions between those variables too, right?
Absolutely. That's where it gets really interesting. That brings us to some key terms we should define. Factors, main effects, and interaction.
Okay, let's define those.
All right, so factors, those are just the independent variables being studied, like the number of words and cues in that memory experiment.
Okay.
Main effects refer to the overall impact of each factor on the dependent variable.
Gotcha.
In the memory study, that would be the number of words recalled.
So the main effect of number of words would tell us if, on average, people recalled more words from shorter lists or longer lists, regardless of whether they had cues or not.
Exactly. You got it.
Makes sense.
And then we have interaction, which is where things get really cool.
Oh, this is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where we see how the effect of one variable can actually depend on the level of another variable.
So it's not just that each variable has its own impact, it's that they can actually work together.
Yeah, influence each other sometimes in unexpected ways.
In unexpected ways, yeah.
The textbook mentions a great example of interaction from a cholesterol reduction clinic.
Okay.
They were studying the effects of both diet and exercise on cholesterol levels.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
You're probably thinking diet and exercise work best together, right?
Yeah. That's what I've always heard.
Right, and that's exactly what they found. Both diet and exercise individually had a positive effect on reducing cholesterol.
Okay, makes sense.
But when they combined those two, the results were amazing.
Oh, wow, so they were even better together.
Exactly. They produced what we call a synergistic effect.
Synergistic coffee.
The reduction in cholesterol was greater than what you would expect if you just added the benefit of diet and the benefit of exercise together.
So it wasn't just 1 + 1 = 2. It was like 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
The textbook also mentions 3 specific types of interaction: antagonistic, synergistic, and ceiling effect.
Oh yeah, those are important distinctions. Let's break those down a bit.
Okay.
Antagonistic interaction is when the two variables kind of work against each other.
Okay.
It's almost like they're canceling each other out.
They're fighting?
Yeah. Like imagine a study looking at the effects of caffeine and alcohol on reaction time. We know caffeine might improve your reaction time while alcohol slows it down.
Right.
But if you have both caffeine and alcohol, their effects might actually negate each other.
Oh, interesting.
And you might end up with no overall change in your reaction time.
So it's like they cancel each other out.
Exactly. Now, for synergistic interaction, we already talked about the cholesterol example,
Right.
where diet and exercise work together to create a larger effect than either one alone.
Yeah.
Do you want to try and think of another example?
Okay, let me think.
Yeah.
What about like fertilizer and sunlight on plant growth?
Perfect. Both factors individually contribute to growth, of course. But when a plant has enough sunlight and fertilizer, it might grow way faster than you would expect based on just the sunlight or just the fertilizer alone.
Right, because they're working together.
Exactly. That amplified effect really shows the synergy between those variables.
Got it. So with a synergistic interaction, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
You got it. Now, what about that last type of interaction, the ceiling effect?
Yeah, what about that one?
Think of it this way. Imagine you're a tutor working with a student who's already amazing at math.
Oh.
Your tutoring might help them improve a little, but they're already doing so well that there's only so much more they can improve.
Yeah, they're already like almost perfect.
Right, and that's like the ceiling effect. One variable has a smaller effect when it's paired with higher levels of another variable.
So in that example, the student's natural ability is creating a ceiling for how much the tutoring can help.
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it.
So the ceiling effect can happen in all sorts of scenarios then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like imagine studying the effects of a new medication on patients who are already responding really well to their current treatment.
I see.
The new medication might not make as big of a difference for them because they're already doing so well.
This is all so fascinating. It really shows how much more information we can get from a factorial design compared to just looking at one variable at a time.
Absolutely. And there's even more to explore.
Oh.
Did you know that there are actually different types of factorial designs depending on how those variables are manipulated and measured?
That's right. The textbook mentioned within subject, between subject, and mixed factorial designs.
Those are the ones.
Let's dive into those after a quick... Okay, so right before the break, we were about to jump into those different types of factorial designs.
Oh, yeah, those are cool.
Within subject, between subject and mixed.
Oh, yeah.
It all sounds kind of technical, but I'm sure you can like break it down for us.
Absolutely. Let's start with within subject factorial designs.
Okay.
In this type of design, each participant actually experiences all the different combinations of the independent variables.
Oh, so it's like each person is their own little mini experiment.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
I remember the textbook had that interesting example with the deep sea divers to illustrate this.
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic. It was a study by Godden and Baddeley in 1975.
Uh-huh.
They were looking at how the environment where you learn something can influence your ability to remember it later. Like, they had this idea that recall would be better when the environment during testing matched the environment during learning.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So they had deep sea divers learn a list of words either on the beach or underwater.
Okay.
And then they tested their recall in both environments as well.
Oh, wow. So that creates like 4 different scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Divers learned on the beach and were tested on the beach.
Yep.
Learned on the beach and tested underwater.
Oh.
Learned underwater and were tested on the beach.
Yeah.
And learned underwater and tested underwater.
Exactly. And since each diver experienced all 4 conditions, this was a within-subject design.
Wow. That's a really smart way to control for individual differences in memory.
It is.
By comparing each diver's performance across those situations, the researchers could really zero in on the effect of the environment on recall.
Yeah, it's like they're canceling out that individual variation.
Right, exactly. Okay, so that's within subject design.
Right.
What about between subject?
Okay, so between subject factorial designs are a little different.
Okay.
Here you have different groups of participants.
Okay.
And each group is assigned to just one combination of the independent variables.
Oh, so each person only experiences one specific condition.
Exactly.
Okay, so going back to our deep sea diver example.
Yeah.
If it were a between subject design, we'd have 4 separate groups of divers,
Right.
with each group only doing one of those learning and recall combinations.
Exactly.
Some divers would only experience the beach, others only underwater.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
Now, there's one more type of factorial design we should talk about. Mixed factorial designs.
Oh, right, mixed factorial designs.
Which, as you might guess, combine elements of both within subject and between subject designs.
Okay, so like a hybrid approach.
Yeah, exactly. They have at least one independent variable that's manipulated within subjects where everyone experiences it, and at least one that's manipulated between subjects where different groups experience different things.
I remember the textbook had that example about studying the effects of both gender and alcohol consumption on risk-taking behavior while driving.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So gender would be a between subjects variable because you can't be both male and female.
Right, exactly.
But alcohol consumption could be a within subjects variable because everyone could experience different levels of alcohol intake.
You nailed it. That's a perfect example of a mixed factorial design.
Awesome. Okay, so we've covered a lot about factorial designs, but like, why should we care about these different designs?
Yeah, that's a great question.
What's the big takeaway here?
Well, the textbook highlights some key advantages of factorial designs.
Okay, what are those?
The big one is that you can study multiple variables at the same time.
Right, because in the real world, things are never that simple.
Exactly. There are always multiple things interacting and influencing each other.
So factorial designs give us a more realistic picture then.
I think so. And they're much more efficient than studying just one variable at a time.
Right, like you get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, exactly. And you get a much richer understanding.
It's like that saying, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
I love that one.
With factorial designs, we have a whole toolkit to understand these complex interactions.
Absolutely.
But are there any downsides to this approach? It seems like it could get really complicated really fast.
You're right, there are some limitations. The textbook mentions that factorial designs can become quite complex, especially when you have a lot of variables with lots of levels within each one.
Right.
The more you add, the more participants you need, and the data analysis gets much harder.
Yeah, you need a ton of data to get a clear picture.
Exactly. It's kind of like those choose-your-own-adventure books.
Oh, yeah.
The more choices there are, the more complicated the story gets.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So researchers really need to weigh the benefits of getting all that extra information from a factorial design against that increased complexity and cost.
They do. It's a balancing act for sure. Sometimes a simpler design might be more appropriate depending on the research question.
So if you were designing a study, you need to think carefully about your research question, the resources you have, and the level of complexity you're comfortable with.
Absolutely. It's definitely an art as much as a science.
But in the end, factorial designs seem like a really powerful tool for understanding complex things,
They are.
from like human behavior to biological processes.
Pretty much anything where multiple factors are at play.
Yeah, they give us a way to unravel those mysteries.
They do.
Okay, so to recap, we've looked at what factorial designs are, why they're so useful, and the different types researchers use.
Yep. Within subject, between subject, and mixed.
And we even talked about some of the advantages and limitations of this approach.
We did.
But before we wrap up, let's just do a quick review of the key takeaways.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so first, factorial designs allow researchers to study multiple independent variables all at the same time.
Right, and that gives them a more complete and realistic understanding than just looking at one variable at a time.
We also learned about those three key terms:
Oh, yeah, those are important.
factors, main effects, and interaction.
They describe how those variables work individually and together.
Right. And then we explored those three types of factorial designs within subject, between subject, and mixed.
Each with its own strengths and applications.
Right. And finally, we considered the advantages and limitations of factorial designs,
Yeah, those trade-offs.
realizing that careful planning is key.
Absolutely. You need to make sure you have the resources to handle the complexity.
So now that we've got all this knowledge, how can we use it in our own lives?
That's the big question. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that the world is rarely simple.
Yeah.
Most things we encounter are influenced by a bunch of different factors, often interacting in complex ways.
Right.
Understanding factorial design gives you a new way to think about those interactions.
Yeah, like a framework.
Exactly. And that can help you make more informed decisions.
Think about a decision you're facing right now. Are there multiple factors involved? Could a factorial design approach help you understand the situation better and make a smarter choice? It's definitely something to think about. Yeah, it's like having a superpower.
I know, right?
Being able to see all those hidden connections that most people miss.
And that's factorial design for you?
Exactly. Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into this fascinating world of factorial design.
We covered a lot today.
Yeah, we did. from those basic definitions to those different types of designs.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, we even talked about how you can apply this stuff to make better decisions in your own life.
It's pretty cool stuff once you get into it.
Yeah, totally. I feel like I'm looking at the world differently now.
That's the best part about understanding research.
It is.
It really gives you a new way to look at things.
So remember, if you're ever facing a tough choice or just wondering about different factors influencing something you're interested in, think back to what we talked about today.
That's great advice.
That factorial design approach could give you this insight you need to crack the code.
It could. You might even start designing your own little experiments.
Oh, that's a fun idea.
Just remember to keep ethics in mind.
Yeah, of course. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been fun exploring this with you.
Me too.
And until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.
See you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content like this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community for more insights into psychology and personal development. Let's grow and learn together. See you in the next video.